day. Hi, my name is Irolu Aboyeji, and I'm here to do a presentation on the readings I was assigned that all have a general theme of humanizing the poor in Mumbai, India. It's about humanizing people that live in the different slums of India and how progressive progressive neoliberalism has been a double-edged sword for them, sometimes causing more damage than good, and how these decisions made by governments impact them, and how the existence of the people in these slums are viewed by the government. The first thing comes from from the reading Against the Odds, the slum rehabilitation in neoliberal Mumbai. So this reading starts off the general theme of how the the value of the lives of the people that live in the slums varies based on the season. So in periods of time getting closer and closer to the election cycle, these people have an increased life value. So suddenly everyone cares about their lives because they have to vote. So politicians care about them. They don't talk about them as disparagingly. They relax certain laws that are meant to destroy the slums and relocate the people. They try not to make any really brash decisions that they feel will have effects on them. In this process, it creates a whole new perspective of subjectivity for these slum dwellers, because after the election cycles, certain laws are seriously obeyed and complied by the government that's meant to get rid of people that live in slums. So serious relocation of people and demolition of slums starts to happen, because at this point they don't care about the people that live in the slums since they've already voted. And this is a large thing throughout the readings in this section, that people seem to only care about these people in relation to what they can do for them. This is one of the main values of neoliberalism, where everyone is meant to be constantly working and contributing to move the society forward. And if you cannot work and contribute, you're going to be left behind. So for the few moments up until these people can cast their votes, they're seriously considered as members of society. But after that, their importance drops a lot. So the thesis statement for this reading is this quote. Is not really, this reading didn't have a thesis, it had a research question. It had a few research questions, and these are quoted directly from the reading. What new opportunities for rehabilitation are offered under neoliberal conditions? What are the constraints imposed by these conditions? How does neoliberalization affect local agencies, communities, and the processes in specific slum rehabilitation projects? What can we say about the odds of success in various projects under the conditions of neoliberalism? And these questions were very seriously researched and answered in the reading. They all follow this specific theme, and research on those questions is what led to this larger conversation of how, for the period leading up to the political activity of these people that live in the slum, their value actually increases. So normally during like a normal period of time where there's no election cycle immediately coming up, most governments will not be willing to spend money on people that live in the slums, because it's seen as a waste, seen as giving away free money, and neoliberal governments are not very supportive of welfare. While they may be more, they don't want to give away free money, they want to still keep the ethics of capitalism. So there's less support for systems like this. So any system that has an overwhelming change that leads to an overwhelming change in status for these people the neoliberal governments won't support as much. So, and this is proved by this quote from the article. But in the urban political arena, neoliberalism has a tendency to forge a political culture that is strongly pro-growth and shows little tolerance for potentially wasteful policies aimed at supporting slum dwellers and the poor in general. When it comes to slum rehabilitation, this paradox is particularly salient in urban areas with intense competition for land, especially, for example, Mumbai. So another thing that this research revealed was that the land that these people are squatting on has value. It's actually very valuable. And this, I'm judging from the economics of it and the breakdown that they provided, this research is very important. This research provided a very important view of the dynamics that may cause the government to not be as willing to support these slum dwellers because they own the land they squat on. Most of them own the land they squat on, and some of them actually have titles for the land that they squat on. And the land has a lot of value, ranging like I saw the pricing and I was quite surprised because you were expecting it to be lesser or free, but the prices are huge. And something that, and because of this, there's like a perspective for people, for the middle class people, where they don't like the poor people and they feel like the poor people are stealing the land because the land has value. The things can be built, like development can be had on the land where the slum dwellers live, but it's not possible because of the ethics of trying to kick out the slum dwellers while their votes are still very valuable. So it creates a dynamic with the middle class of this neoliberal society where the middle class doesn't, a lot of people in the middle class don't like the slum dwellers because their votes are equal. So, and that's one of the beauties of democracy, no matter how, no matter the class, no matter what, in most cases, two votes are equal. So while the slum numbers match are almost the same as the number of people who live outside the slums in the beautiful cities, it creates like this imbalance in election politics where these slums are basically votes. There's a term used in the article, they call the slums vote banks. So in order for a politician to have good sway on an election, they will just invest in improving the slums and like pampering them to gain this political advantage. And I cut this quote from there, from the reading to show this. The middle class who would rather live in a city without poor people hate the urban poor. They make our city dirty. They breed. They fight. They are preventing the city from becoming truly global, say the building Wallace. Plus, complain these well-headed citizens because the poor can vote. Because the poor can vote, politicians pamper and cultivate them, knowing that their votes decide who is elected. This is unfair, they argue. Disenfranchise them. This is the new cry of some of the middle class people in Mumbai. These poor living in slums are illegal and they are squatting on land not meant for that purpose. So deny them the vote. This they believe will solve the problem. So this is a very extremist view. It's not as popular according to the reading, but it's like it's kind of what the entire neoliberal society points towards because these people have such a large sway on political decisions, but they have little power outside that. So it's like a very unique power dynamic. Unlike the one in when you compare it to somewhere like America, where if this was an issue, America would just engage in very severe voter suppression. Like they would start requesting documents, proof of birth, and like they would just kind of slowly out-classify whoever they didn't want to vote. But in this situation in Mumbai, everyone can still vote. So these people don't lose their political power. giving them like a temporary subjectivity to the middle class who live in the city. So this was like the basis for the this is the basis for almost all the readings moving forward. And now the second reading is directly related to this neoliberal situation, and it's on, sorry, one man handled fragmented power and political entrepreneurship in globalizing Mumbai. So this article is generally about this man, Mukesh Mehta. He's a Mumbai born architect who moved to New York, and he was like very successful, and he came back to come and observe and initiate political reform. So his solution, and part of the solution he engaged in with many NGOs and like the government, and part of his political activism is building, like concentrating these slums and building large apartment buildings on them. So what they do is they get like everybody on the slum and they give them temporary living. They clear out the slum, they dismantle it, and they build apartments there. And then they move everybody back and give them part ownership of the apartment they moved into. So this relates back to the former reading where the people actually own the land they live on. So by changing the land that's just like slum living to like in an apartment, it dramatically increases the value of the land. And this is kind of like government sponsored. I'm pretty sure he does have a position he does have a political position, and I was kind of struggling understanding that part of it. But it does, like, this method of economic growth was generally viewed as political entrepreneurship, where like the his whole platform is based on creating deals that are profitable to the government. And by like just by basis of this profit alone, the deal has to pass. So he creates laws and situations and plans for development that benefit the government enough where not agreeing to the deal is going to be like a clear bad decision, no matter how you look at it. And that's something, and it's a very strong concept of still neoliberalism because it's very forward. It's still moving forward or get left behind, same type of mentality. But in this type of case, you're trying to leave the people that don't agree with you behind. So his presentation of his whole thing is called political entrepreneurship. But like in his journey to kind of make all these changes and develop this situation, he meets a lot of conflict and very little civil support because it seems what the general idea I got from the reading was that his plans are too complex to break down very easily and very like and to make very viral. So these kind of situations like don't allow him to get as much political support as he should be getting for as much civil good as he's doing. So like that's one of the big problems of his version of political entrepreneurship. And like the reading was not really criticizing him as much for taking this neoliberal approach. It was kind of pointing out the flaws of the approach and why it's not viable. Like the approach depends too much. Like it depends on like very good people in these positions. And it's very unlikely to have someone in that position to always have like good policies. It's not a sustainable format for good societal development. And he always met too much political resistance and too little political support. That was a very big point that the article kept talking about because for all his work, he was getting very little like support from normal people, everyday people, the same people that vote, but he was getting a lot of political resistance because of the nature of his plans. The the thesis for that reading was, while political entrepreneurship is necessary, it may not be sufficient to facilitate the development planning amidst these institutional fragmentations and political contestations. And finally, the first reading, the reading that I kind of liked the most was Citizens and Squatters, the contested subject of public policy in neoliberal Mumbai. So this article was very heavy on the like kind of the basic difference between normal civilian citizens and squatters. It kind of plays back to that quote I read about how like people in the middle class in Bai wanted like poor people not to be able to vote. And this is a thing that's very heavily shown in this reading because it shows how like there's a fundamental difference in the standard of living of these two groups of people, despite the fact that they are both citizens of the same country. And it's like the same resources should be available to both groups of people. So this is a quote I found relating to that. In the face of growing constriction of the constitution of the public, an ethical orientation to public policy directs attention to not just the resources denied to the growing number of people, but also to the subjectivity that is routinely denied to these populations. So a big factor here is that resources aren't provided to these poor communities as easily or as frequently as they're provided to richer communities. Even if they're provided as frequently, due to like a lack of context, I will call it, the resources are not as good as they should be. Like there's this, yeah, I already talked about the pseudo citizen status of slum dwellers. So like there's a lack of subjectivity in government sponsored development projects. So while whatever the people need isn't really taken into account, what is provided is what the government thinks the people need. So like there might be a lot of focus on infrastructure like healthcare or something like healthcare or education, but the infrastructure present does not allow these resources to be as widespread or as effective as they should be. And something that was referenced a lot here was these bathroom economics. So like bathroom economics is a big fact part of this article. And I think it provides a lot of perspective. So for the slums, these are like handmade houses with very little tools. They don't have good bathrooms. And so there are places that can be walked to that have good bathroom, like some stores, some like some shops, and some places, most places don't. So to use the bathroom, these people that live in slums pay money to like the guards at the stores or the shopkeepers to be able to use their bathroom. And it quickly adds up. So for a family of five, according to the article, a family of five can take up one person's whole day's earnings in toilet use. So the idea of them having to frequently pay for toilets to keep like a sanitary society, they can use toilets outside, like just in the slums. They can use unofficial toilets, but most of these people don't because of the health risk attached to it. Sometimes they may travel to a bush to use a bathroom there, but most people actually have to pay for these toilets. So the government wasn't doing anything to address this situation in the way it was meant to be addressed. They were offering solutions that people couldn't use. They were offering solutions that people couldn't use. Since they were offering these solutions that people couldn't use, the entire thing was ineffective. It didn't have as much impact as it should have been pulling for a movement or for before government applications of the money to these slums was not as beneficial as it could have been. So these non-government organizations took over and started building these public toilets free of, like, they would get money together. It's an alliance of different public organizations that set out to tackle this specific problem, and they would build public toilets. And then, in order to kind of forge the camaraderie between the politicians and the people that live in the slums, they would invite politicians to come and open these newly built public toilets. So it's in by doing things like this, the alliance kept the people politically motivated and active, and like it increased their value, leads to that situation where they are pampered right before election cycles, but that situation is better than the alternative where the politicians simply don't care about these people. Yeah, so that's the end of my presentation. My discussion questions are, discussion questions. How would you organize a development plan while preserving a subjective view of the slums? Do you agree with Mushik Mehta's approach to developing with political entrepreneurship? In what ways have you experienced people in power making decisions without subjectivity? Okay, thank you very much.